And Bafana beating the Cranes by 2-0. Those goals coming from the two substitutes, Thapelo Morena as well as Patrick Masongai, and that takes them top of a Group K with one round of qualifiers remaining. And to talk more about these AFCON qualifiers as well as Ghana's shocking failure to qualify, we go all the way to Algeria now, and we're joined by international football journalist Maher Mezahi, and there he is joining us. Good evening from us in South Africa, and thank you for speaking to us, Maher.
Good evening, Tapiso. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, obviously our interest here is with Bafana qualifying with 2 games left to spare. Having been bronze medalists at the last AFCON, what's the feeling on the continent around Bafana?
Hey, lots of respect for Bafana, who perhaps over the last 15 years prior to this one, I thought maybe around the continent we don't take them so seriously. But since the AFCON, under Hugo Broos, a lot of respect for Bafana, especially, this match against Uganda, although it was a dead rubber because South Sudan ended up defeating Congo in the match prior, to go to another country away from home, Kampala, with the atmosphere that there is over there, and to impose yourself. And anybody that watched that match knows that that result was only going to go one way. South Africa was going to win that match. To impose yourself playing that style of football without the stars in attack like Percy Tau, like Tamba Zwane, like Lyle Foster, you're playing with almost a second choice, especially from the front four. That was very, very impressive. So when you can do that consistently away from home, in particular, against good teams like Uganda, that's when you start gaining respect around the continent.
Okay, great to hear. And let's talk about the other teams that have qualified, 18 other teams besides Bafana. Are there any surprises for you here with these qualifiers?
Hey, Botswana are on the verge. They drew with Mauritania, as you guys know, your neighbors to the north. And I watched them, and I was very impressed with how organized they were. We know some of their players like Tumisang Oribonye. He's a player that's played in Algeria before, and he's currently in Morocco. A few good players from Jwaneng Galaxy. I just wonder, though, if they have enough chaos, enough energy, enough explosiveness in attack to really create problems if they were to qualify. But that's one team that definitely I had my eye on. Other than that, I don't think there were too many big surprises. Yeah.
But the big talking point, though, has to be Ghana's failure to qualify. Yes. They've yet to win a game in this qualifying campaign. What's gone so horribly wrong with the Black Stars?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the main question. They should probably hold a parliamentary hearing over this over the next 6 months in Ghana, because seriously, like when you look at the amount of talented players they have on paper, you're Mohamed Kudus, I can go down the list, Ernest Nwama, Jordan Ayew, Thomas Partey, who wasn't here this time around. There's no reason why Ghana should be in this position, but there's clearly something that's happening at the governance position, whether that be with the FA or the coach. 8 players withdrew prior to this match at the very last minute against Angola. And if you watch that match against Angola, it never seemed like the Ghanaian Black Stars ever had a chance. And now they missed their first AFCON for the first time in 20 years. I think there's going to be a postmortem now to see what went wrong. But I think it's more about what's going on in the minds and in the spirits of these players than rather than the amount of talent that's on the pitch.
And when you talk about a postmortem, Maher, do you think maybe the players must take the fall, or do you think it's those who are in charge of football in Ghana?
Yeah, again, that's going to be a big debate. Ato Ado did a decent job with the same group of players at the World Cup a few years back. But really, since the current Ghana FA president, Kurt Okraku, took charge, Ghana haven't been themselves. Prior to that, they had, I think, been to 7 consecutive semifinals at AFCONs up until 2017, and then up 7 years ago since then. Two consecutive AFCON group stage exits, and then the failure to qualify for this one, for the first one in 20 years. I think it is a governance problem, because when you look at the talent, again, Thomas Partey is one of the best players for Arsenal. Mohamed Kudus is one of the best players in the Premier League. This is not really a talent issue, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we saw Jordan Ayew probably scoring one of the goals of the qualifying campaign so far, but still not good enough to send them to Morocco. But the other argument then, or the other side of the coin, could be that the gap is closing between the powerhouses of African football and the so-called minnows. Do you get a sense of that also? We saw some of the results at the previous AFCON also.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right to bring up the previous AFCON. Look, some of the top national teams, top players, I think, are better than ever. When you talk about, that trio over the last 5 years that we had of Sadio Mane, Riyad Mahrez, Mohamed Salah, those are very world-class players and some of the best players in the Premier League at the time. And it's difficult for some of the quote-unquote smaller nations to replicate that kind of talent. But I think perhaps we're not really seeing, I think, smaller teams catch up. I think we're seeing big nations sort of stagnate. And part of that could be coaching. Like I said, the talent is there. But some of these bigger nations, quote unquote, bigger nations, don't really have the budgets to bring in world-class coaches. You talk about Senegal, and Ali Cissé did a great job for nearly a decade, but he was only on $30,000 per month. Ghana were probably looking to pay their coach something similar. Not a lot of these big national teams don't have the money to invest and bring in a world-class coach. And as a result, there are decent coaches willing to take, a smaller job for less salary. And I think that's what's really bridging the gap is the coaching, in my opinion.
Yeah, and but we've seen Morocco. They've been impressive. They're hosting the AFCON next year at home. Surely they will start as the favorites, if not one of the favorites for that AFCON. What would be the expectations, especially after their campaign at the World Cup in Qatar?
Yeah, look, one of the most impressive things about this victory was that they went to Gabon and imposed themselves 5-1 and won Gabon and Franceville. Morocco, one of the criticisms that we had about them, going into the World Cup was that they don't play matches away from home. They're always hosting matches because other teams in their group, maybe they don't have stadiums that are homologated and they decide to play both matches home and away in Morocco. And so I wondered about, that rugged mentality. Do they have it? And perhaps when they went to San Pedro earlier in the year in the AFCON, maybe they couldn't deal with the humidity and some of those external conditions because they weren't used to it. But the fact that they went to Gabon and they did that in Gabon, that was very, very impressive. But they've been qualified throughout this qualifying campaign. They've been qualified from the very first day. What I really wanted to see and what I think has been interesting to see is, will the coach Walid Regragui experiment with personnel and with tactics? And he has, because after the AFCON, the criticism against him was that he was still just playing a 4-1-4-1 every single time, and he was being very rigid with it. But this time around, he's experimented with a lot of different formations, a lot of different combinations in attack. They've done this thing where sometimes they play asymmetrical. They move everybody to the left side of the pitch to isolate Ashraf Hakimi as a right back and give him a lot of space. So honestly, I think they've had a very, very productive qualifying campaign, and they will absolutely be one of 2 or 3 favorites in Morocco in about 13 months' time.
Yeah, they've got Brahim Diaz, who's hit the ground running also after switching nationalities, now scoring twice yesterday. But thank you, Maher, for always being available to speak to us here in South Africa. Always a pleasure catching up with you.
No, pleasure is all mine. Good evening to all my fellow South Africans, or all my great South African friends out there.
See you in Morocco next year, where the pride of the nation, Bafana will be looking to improve from their bronze medal finish at the last AFCON there. Wrapping up what's happening on the continent.